the party, behind the tent, I saw my daughter-in-law kissing my son's best friend. My heart lurched so hard I had to steady myself against the frame of the tent. And when my son turned toward me with that easy smile he had worn since childhood, I lifted my glass, smiled back, and whispered, almost without thinking, "Shh, the best part's coming." This story is an original creation by the Heridas Familia 1 writing team, inspired by the hidden corners of family life and told with the purpose of fostering emotional connection and spreading understanding. My name is Marielle Haddon. I am 68 years old. I had helped arrange this gathering for weeks, moving slower than I did a decade ago, but still taking pride in every detail. Aiden wanted something simple, something warm to celebrate the end of a grueling fire season. And I liked watching him glow when people he cared about stood under the same roof. He had always been that kind of man, steady, loyal, gentle in a way the world rarely rewarded. Under the white tent, people talked and laughed over soft music. I drifted among them the way older mothers do, checking plates, adjusting chairs, resting my hand on Aiden's back each time he passed. His wife, Leighton, looked beautiful in navy silk, and Drew, Aiden's best friend, practically raised in my house, moved around greeting guests as if the place belonged to him. Nothing felt wrong until my chest tightened and I stepped behind the tent for a breath of cooler air. The moment my hands pushed the fabric aside, the world went still. Leighton was there, Drew was there, and their mouths were pressed together as if they had every right to touch each other that way. It was not a clumsy kiss. It was practiced, familiar. Drew's hand rested on her waist with the kind of confidence a man gains only after repeating a mistake many times. Leighton leaned into him like she had been starved for that moment. I did not gasp. I did not cry. At my age, shock hits differently, quieter, but deeper, the kind that sinks into the bones before it reaches the heart. I stepped back before they saw me. My fingers trembled. So I curled them into my palm the way I used to when I was younger and afraid someone would notice my fear. For a long second, I simply stood there behind the tent, listening to the music, letting its steady rhythm hold me upright. Then I heard Aiden's voice. "Mom, you disappeared. Are you all right?" I turned toward him. His face held nothing but warmth. That unguarded trust that had followed him all the way from childhood into adulthood. I could not let him see what I had just seen. Not yet. His future was still shaped by the people in that tent, and if it was going to break, I needed to understand how deep the cracks went. So I lifted my glass. The same gesture I had made hundreds of times at school plays, birthdays, and graduations. And I forced a small smile. "I'm fine, sweetheart." He believed me instantly. He always had. As he walked me back toward the tent entrance, I could still feel the image burning behind my eyes. Leighton's hand in Drew's hair, Drew pulling her closer, as if my son did not exist. A betrayal does not need words to cut. Sometimes silence is sharper. I slipped back into the crowd, letting the evening carry on as if nothing had shattered. People laughed, plates clattered. Leighton reappeared moments later with perfectly applied lipstick. Drew followed with a casual grin. No one suspected a thing, but I did. And the truth, once seen, cannot be unseen. By the time the night quieted, I already knew I would not confront anyone here. Not in front of Aiden. Not while emotions ran wild. I had survived enough storms in my life to understand that timing is everything. I left the tent with a steady breath, carrying the weight of what I knew into the dimming night. And deep down, a new certainty formed. This kiss behind the tent was only the beginning of a much larger truth. That truth would wait for me in the morning. I stayed close to the tent, pretending to check on the dessert table while my pulse thudded behind my ribs. At my age, Fear does not race, it settles. Heavy and deliberate. Like something trying to anchor me to the ground. I breathed slowly, steadying myself. But the image would not leave Leighton pressed into Drew's arms as if she belonged there. Aiden brushed past me again. Mom, are you sure you're all right? I'm fine, I said softly. Just watching everything. He smiled and moved toward a group of coworkers. I let myself exhale only after he turned away. From the corner of my eye, I saw Leighton step back into the tent. Her expression was calm, controlled. The kind of composure a woman wears when she believes she has gotten away with something. Drew followed a few seconds later, tugging down his shirt as if adjusting for comfort. But I knew better. He had been lying to me since he was a teenager, smiling through trouble. Promising he had everything under control, Aiden waved him over. Drew, you see the turnout, Mom helped with half of it. Drew clapped Aiden on the shoulder. She always does. You're lucky. Man. I watched him carefully. His voice was smooth. Too smooth. I had heard it tremble before, after poor grades, after arguments, after heartbreaks. But tonight, it held a practiced steadiness. Almost rehearsed. Leighton joined them, looping her arm through Aiden's as though she owned every inch of him. Your mom throws the best events, she said, leaning her head lightly against his shoulder. Your help made it easy, Aiden said warmly. I felt the smallest crack inside my chest. Drew glanced at Leighton for a moment too long. It was subtle, a flicker, but it was there, the kind of look two people share when neither can speak aloud what they truly want. I stepped closer, forcing myself into the circle. Aiden, sweetheart, have you eaten? Not yet, he said. We were waiting for you. Leighton smiled at me, polite and bright. I could almost believe she was innocent if I had not seen her lips on someone else's moments earlier. Drew cleared his throat. I'll grab plates. No, I said sharply, then softened my tone. Let Aiden do it. He knows what I like. Aiden laughed. You always order the same thing anyway. He walked toward the catering table, leaving Leighton and Drew standing beside me. Leighton's hand drifted toward her waist right where Drew's hand had been minutes ago. Drew shifted his weight, avoiding my eyes. Leighton spoke first. Is everything okay? Marielle, you seem quiet. I held her gaze. I had a moment of dizziness. I stepped outside for air. Drew's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. You should sit down if you're dizzy. I'm steady now, I replied. Leighton offered a gentle smile. If you need anything, let me know. Her words were warm, but the warmth was false. She was testing the air, trying to sense whether I knew something. Aiden returned with plates. Mom, I got you the pasta you like. Thank you, I said, but my voice wasn't as strong as I wished. We sat at a table together. Drew made an excuse to get a drink. Leighton followed him with her eyes before catching herself and looking away quickly. Aiden chatted about work, about the upcoming training cycle, about nothing important. I nodded at all the right moments, though my mind was somewhere else entirely. The betrayal was real. It was alive in every stolen glance, every stilted breath between Leighton and Drew. And I was the only one who had seen the truth. When the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Leighton kissed my cheek. Thank you for tonight, she whispered. Her closeness made my skin prickle. I watched her walk toward the house with Aiden's arm around her shoulders, and my heart pressed painfully against my ribs. I could not unsee what I had seen, and the question lingered like a weight in my chest. Do I tell my son tonight? Or wait until I understand how much more there is to uncover? Aiden noticed the tremor in my hand before I could hide it. He stepped closer, lowering his voice the way he used to when he was a boy, worried he had hurt my feelings. Mom, you sure you're all right? The kindness in his face almost broke me. I curled my fingers tighter around the stem of the champagne glass and forced my hand to still. "I'm fine, sweetheart," I said, keeping my eyes on him and not on the two people who were doing everything in their power to destroy him. Behind Aiden, Drew and Leighton stood at opposite sides of the tent, pretending not to watch each other. Drew lifted a drink to his lips, but his eyes flicked toward her with a nervousness he could not mask. Leighton smoothed her dress, too slowly, too deliberately. Their guilt filled the air between them. Aiden glanced over his shoulder. "Did something happen?" My breath tightened. "Nothing that can't wait." He reached for my arm. "Do you want to sit?" I shook my head. "No. I need to speak to everyone in a moment." His brows lifted. "You're giving a speech. You didn't say anything." I decided just now, and I had, because I needed the room to settle, to shift, to feel something tremble beneath their polished smiles. Across the tent, the band quieted for a brief break. Guests gathered near the small platform we had set up earlier that day. It wasn't meant for anything important, just casual announcements. But tonight, it would hold the weight I could not yet speak aloud. Aiden squeezed my hand gently. "Mom, you don't have to push yourself. I'm not pushing," I said softly. "I'm steady." He studied me for a long second. Then he nodded, trusting me the way he always had. I lifted my glass slightly, feeling the chill of it against my palm. My heart ached for the truth he did not yet know. I leaned toward him, letting the noise around us fade for a moment. "Sweetheart," I whispered. "Shh. The best part's coming." He blinked. "What does that mean?" I didn't answer. "Not yet." I stepped away from him and walked toward the platform. Each step felt deliberate, grounded, shaped by the years behind me, the storms I had lived through, the betrayals I had survived, the lessons my age had carved deep into bone. Someone handed me a microphone. My fingers no longer trembled. The crowd hushed as I faced them. My posture straight, my breath calm. My gaze swept the room, landing briefly on Drew, then on Leighton. Their expressions shifted, fear flickering behind their practiced smiles. I smiled back, warm, but edged with something neither of them expected. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice clear, steady, unshaken. "Before the evening continues, I'd like to share a few words." The tension rippled so subtly, only I could trace its origin. I continued speaking, letting my tone remain gentle, but my eyes held truth, just beneath the surface. Truth sharp enough to threaten the two people who thought they had hidden well. As I spoke, I watched their breaths hitch, their shoulders stiffen, their confidence falter. By the time I stepped off the stage, I knew what I needed to know. They heard me. They understood the warning wrapped in my calm. But I could not yet tell whether they realized something far more dangerous I already knew. The moment I stepped down from the small platform, the room shifted. It was subtle at first. Voices dipping, eyes narrowing, conversations pausing mid-sentence. No one knew exactly what I had implied, but they felt the tremor underneath it. People who had known me for decades understood that I did not speak lightly, not in front of a crowd, and certainly not with that calm. Aiden walked to me immediately. "Mom, that was different from what I expected." I touched his arm. "Different can be honest." He studied my face as if trying to decode something I could not yet say aloud. Before he could speak again, a neighbor approached to compliment the speech, giving me just enough distance from my son to breathe. Across the tent, Leighton lifted her champagne with a bright smile, one she pushed too hard, the kind that strained the muscles around her eyes. Guests congratulated her on hosting such a lovely evening, but her attention kept drifting toward Drew. He was no longer at her side. He had vanished halfway through my speech, slipping behind a group of co-workers as if the echo of my words burned his skin. Aiden followed my gaze. Has anyone seen Drew? He was right here. He needed air, I said calmly. Aiden frowned. He didn't say anything. He did not need to. Leighton stepped forward quickly. Her voice sweetened, but tight. Aiden. He mentioned earlier that he might take a call. He's been waiting on something from his captain. It was a beautiful lie, smooth, prepared, and offered too fast. Aiden accepted it without hesitation. I watched the two of them. The woman who had just broken my son's trust, and the friend he loved like a brother. Their energy prickled with guilt, even as they pretended nothing had changed. A small group of guests huddled near the bar, whispering behind raised hands. One woman murmured, "Did you hear her? Marielle never talks about loyalty like that unless something's wrong." A man replied. It sounded pointed, toward someone in particular. Their eyes slid not toward me, but toward Leighton. Leighton felt it. Her fingers tightened around her glass, knuckles whitening. She approached me with a practiced grace that fooled everyone except the one person she needed to fool most. "Marielle," she said carefully, "your speech was powerful." There was a slight tremor in her voice. She hoped I had simply been emotional. She hoped I had not seen anything. I met her gaze. I spoke from experience. Her throat bobbled with a swallow. "Well, I'm glad the message resonated, with some more than others." For a fraction of a second, her mask slipped fear, unmistakable, flickered in her eyes. Then she straightened her shoulders and smiled again, brighter, harder, like a woman determined to pretend she was not cornered. Aiden noticed none of it. He walked toward us carrying a plate of appetizers. "Everything all right over here?" Leighton looped her arm through his. "Perfect," she said quickly. I nodded. "Lovely evening." Truly. Drew reappeared then, stepping inside from the dark yard. His face was flushed, breath quick. When his eyes met mine, he paused. It was only a heartbeat of hesitation, but it told me everything. He had heard enough in my speech to know I was not blind. Aiden beamed. "There you are. We thought you left." "Just needed a minute," Drew muttered. Leighton's shoulders eased at the sight of him, but both avoided standing too close together. They moved with the anxious choreography of people who knew eyes were watching. And the room continued to shift, guests sensing tension they could not name, conversations thinning into cautious silence, laughter dimming into murmurs. Aiden, caught between the two people he trusted most, remained blissfully unaware. I stood beside him, my heart heavy with what I carried, and the truth settled deeper into my bones. This betrayal was not new. It had been living here long before tonight. Long after the last guest left and the tent lights dimmed, I sat at my kitchen table replaying the night in my mind. The betrayal I witnessed felt fresh, sharp, but the truth was older than I wanted to admit. Once the shock settled, memory crawled out of its hiding places, carrying fragments I had ignored. Aiden had always worked long shifts. Fire season stretched him thin 2 days on, 1 day off. Nights filled with calls that stole sleep from him. I used to visit to leave dinner in his fridge and check on the house. Sometimes I found Drew there. One afternoon, I had stepped inside without knocking, a habit my son never minded. Drew stood in the kitchen, startled, holding a bottle of red wine. "Oh, Marielle," he said, too breathless for a simple greeting. "Leighton and we were just talking about Aiden's birthday plans." His voice had been shaky. His shirt wrinkled. I noticed a second glass on the counter, lipstick smeared on the rim. I told myself it was nothing. Leighton loved wine. Drew liked to chat. They shared interests. That was all. I had smiled politely. "I'm sure you two have wonderful ideas." He had nodded too quickly. "Just brainstorming. You know." Later, I mentioned it to Leighton while folding laundry. "Drew stopped by today," I said. "You two seem to be talking closely." She didn't look up from her phone. He needed advice on a gift for his mother. We talk sometimes, he's family, you know. Then she added, lightly, Aiden trusts us. I had believed her. Not because she was convincing, but because I wanted her words to be true. Another memory surfaced: the spare bedroom they used as storage. I had asked Aiden once, "Why are you missing 2 of your nicer wine bottles, the ones we bought for holidays?" He shrugged. Leighton probably opened them with friends. Which friends, I pressed. He laughed. Mom, she has a life outside of work. Leave her be. But later, when I helped him move a bookshelf, I found one of those bottles empty in a drawer, not where someone would forget it, but where someone would hide it. Drew's handwriting was on a small note tucked beneath. Next time, bring the other one. This one's too sweet. When I'd shown Leighton the note, she'd laughed. Oh, that was from months ago. We were pairing wine for a dinner party. Drew hated this one. She had tossed the note in the trash before I could study it again. Her smile had been smooth, practiced. There had been other things too. Small things. Once, while helping prepare for a family barbecue, I found Leighton in the backyard talking to someone on speakerphone. She turned the moment she saw me, ending the call abruptly. Everything all right, I asked. Yes, she said, smiling. Just my cousin. But her cousin lived in New Jersey. And the voice on the phone had not carried an East Coast accent. It had been Drew's low, hurried tone. Another night. Aiden had come home early from a shift. He phoned me the next morning, laughing. You won't believe it. Drew and Leighton were trying to fix the garage light together. She said she panicked because she hates ladders. I remembered the way his voice sounded light, trusting. I remembered how proud he was of their bond, his wife and his closest friend. But tonight, the truth settled like a weight in my stomach. All those moments, all those excuses, all those almost confessions, they were not random. They were a pattern. I leaned back in my chair, letting the ache seep deeper. Age teaches you to forgive quickly, to let go of friction before it becomes resentment. But age also dulls your instincts when you want the world to be gentler than it is. Aiden's laughter echoed faintly in my memory. Leighton's soft voice. Drew's casual ease. They had woven a story for him, a story I had helped support by looking away from the loose threads. I opened my eyes slowly. The house felt colder. The morning after the party, Aiden came by my house earlier than usual. I heard his truck before I saw him steady engine. The same rhythm I'd grown used to since he first started driving as a teenager. I opened the door before he even knocked. Mom, he said, giving me that familiar half-smile. Thought I'd bring you breakfast? I stepped aside. You didn't have to. I wanted to, he said, setting the paper bag on the counter. You looked tired last night. Tired. That was the word he chose. Not shaken, not disturbed, just tired. I watched him pour coffee as though nothing had shifted under his feet. I envied that innocence. And it terrified me. You gave a strong speech, he added lightly. Everyone was talking about it. I know they were. He caught the tone in my voice and paused. Was something bothering you? My heart moved painfully inside my chest. I had spent decades learning how not to let my emotions spill over, but the weight of what I carried tugged at my composure. Aiden, I began carefully. What did you think of the atmosphere last night? He frowned. Atmosphere? Yes. He shrugged. I thought it was fine. People were relaxed. Leighton said she had a great time. His wife, the woman who had kissed someone else behind a tent less than 20 feet from him. I pulled out a chair and gestured for him to sit. Your father was easily fooled by the people he loved, I said gently. He trusted too quickly. Aiden's expression tightened. Mom, if this is about Leighton, it is not about her. I cut in softly. It is about you. He blinked. Me. You are loyal, I said. Deeply. But loyalty can blind a person. Even a good one. He leaned back in his chair, defensive but trying to understand. Are you saying someone is taking advantage of me? I drew a slow breath. I am saying you need to pay attention. Hey. To what his voice held the confusion of a boy who still believed the world would repay his goodness with honesty. I remembered him at 8 years old, handing out his lunch to a classmate who cried over a broken sandwich. He had always given more than he had, always assumed people deserved it. I placed my hand over his. Sweetheart, I am older. I have seen things you haven't. Sometimes people around us make choices we don't expect. You're worrying too much, he said, trying to lighten the moment. Leighton and Drew, they'd never do anything to hurt me. The names together struck like a bruise. He did not see what I saw. Not yet, Aiden, I murmured. Trust is precious. But it is not free. You should not hand it out so easily. He stiffened. You don't like Leighton, do you? You've never said it, but I can feel it sometimes. This is not about liking her. Then what is it? His eyes were full of expectation, waiting for an answer I could not give without shattering him. I felt the words rising, the truth bracing against my teeth, begging to be spoken, but not yet. Not until I understood the full shape of what they had done. Not until I could protect him from the collapse that would follow. I squeezed his hand instead. I want you to be careful. That sounds like a warning. Consider it one. Aiden searched my face for several breaths. Then his shoulders softened. He reached out, covering my hand with both of his. I know you're trying to look out for me, Mom, but I promise everything is fine. He believed that. He truly did, and I had never feared for him more. When he left, the house felt heavier than before. Every shadow whispering the truth I hadn't spoken aloud. The house was quiet when I let myself in. Aiden and Leighton had left earlier after dropping off borrowed serving trays, and the kitchen still smelled faintly of roasted garlic and wine. I was wiping down the counter when I saw a phone sitting near the sink. It wasn't mine. It wasn't Aiden's. Leighton must have forgotten it. I reached for it to place it aside. Nothing more. But as my fingers touched the screen, it lit up. A preview message flashed across the top. The sender Drew. Did you ask about the savings yet? He'll never question you. That's what makes this so easy. My hand froze. A second message appeared before I could take a breath. If he agrees, we can get everything moving this month. I'm serious. He's too trusting for his own good. I stared at the words, my heartbeat pressing painfully behind my ribs. A third message arrived, blistering in its cruelty. He still thinks you married him for love. God, Leighton. He has no idea. My breath left me in a slow, shaking exhale. This was not just infidelity. This was planning. This was taking... I unlocked the phone she used, the same passcode she told me she used for everything. I once thought that made her transparent, predictable. Now it only made the truth easier to reach. The message thread opened fully. Drew had written, "Tell him it's for a long-term investment. He'll eat that up. He trusts you more than anyone." Leighton responded earlier that day. "I can get him to move at least a portion into a joint account. He won't think twice." Portion. Joint account. She meant Aiden's personal savings, the money he had built working night shifts. Double shifts. Dangerous calls. Holidays spent in smoke-filled gear instead of at home. My throat tightened as another message rolled in. If we can get even half by the end of the month, we'll finally have enough to get out of here. Start over. The word we sliced deeper than any kiss behind a tent ever could. The front door opened suddenly. I locked the phone and stepped back just as Leighton walked in. "Oh," she said, startled. "I thought you'd be asleep." "I was cleaning," I replied, keeping my voice steady. She spotted her phone on the counter and exhaled in relief. "Thank God. I've been looking everywhere for that." She picked it up. Her eyes darted to me too quick, too sharp. "You didn't read anything, did you?" she asked lightly. No, I lied, matching her tone. I have no interest in your messages. She slipped the phone into her purse. Good. They're mostly boring anyway. We stood there, facing each other with polite expressions that hid bruising truths. She knew I sensed something. I knew she feared what I had already seen, but she smiled, anyway, the same poised, practiced smile she had worn since the day she married my son. I should get going, she said. Aiden's waiting at home. I nodded. Drive safe. She left quickly, her footsteps betraying nerves she tried to conceal. The moment the door closed, I leaned against the counter, steadying myself. They were not just betraying Aiden's heart. They were circling his future, his savings, his stability. Their affair had teeth, and it had been eating at him far longer than I realized. I found Kara the next afternoon not by searching for her, but by fate tugging me in the right direction. I had gone to the grocery store, trying to pretend life still moved the way it used to. As I reached for a carton of eggs, a soft voice behind me said, Marielle. I turned. Kara stood there. Her hair pulled into a loose bun, lines of exhaustion softening her face. She looked older than her 40s. Not by years, but by sorrow. I'm sorry, she said quickly. I hope it's not strange that I recognized you. Drew talked about your family often. My stomach tightened. Did he? She nodded. He said you treated him like a second son. I exhaled slowly. I did. There was a brief, heavy silence before she lowered her gaze. I heard about the party. Small towns don't keep secrets. I studied her. The quiet tremble in her hands, the way she held her shopping basket like it was keeping her upright. What exactly did you hear that Drew disappeared halfway through the night? She said, and that Leighton followed him. It wasn't a question. It wasn't gossip. It was recognition. I stepped closer. Kara, did he do something like this before? A sad, rueful smile tugged at her mouth. He did it to me. Twice. She motioned to a nearby bench. And we walked over together. She sat carefully, as if bracing for old wounds to reopen. When Drew and I dated, she began. He was charming. Loyal, at least, that's what I believed. But he always needed attention, admiration, and if he could get something from someone, he would, something I asked, money, stability, access. Her voice was quiet, but sharp. When he left me the first time, he convinced a coworker to help him with a down payment on a rental property. When he left the second time, he drained half my savings through a joint card he promised he'd never use. My breath caught. Aiden has savings. She nodded slowly. Of course he does. Drew picks generous men, men who trust too easily, men who won't imagine betrayal until it's already carved into them. I pressed my palm against my knee to steady myself. He's using my son. He's using both of them. Kara murmured. Leighton's not innocent, but she's predictable. Drew knows how to keep people hooked, promising love, hinting at a future, asking for just a little help, until that help becomes everything. Her eyes, dark with memory, lifted to mine. Marielle. Once Drew starts planning, he doesn't stop. He takes and takes until there's nothing left to ruin except the person. A chill moved through me. And you survived that in pieces, she whispered. But pieces can still build something stronger. I found myself reaching for her hand, and she didn't pull away. There was no awkwardness, just the quiet understanding of two women who had seen the same shadow wearing different faces. Why tell me all this, I asked. Because, she said gently, someone warned me once, and I didn't listen. I won't let that happen to you. Our shared pain formed an alliance without needing to be spoken. And I knew this was only the beginning. Aiden asked me to come by that afternoon to help him tidy the house before his next shift. He said it casually over the phone, unaware of the storm building behind my ribs. I told him I'd be there in 20 minutes. When I arrived, he was already folding laundry in the living room. Leighton's at brunch with friends, he said. So it's just us. Something about the way he said friends cut deeper than it used to. I forced a smile. Then we'll finish faster. He stepped outside to rinse off the patio furniture, leaving me alone in the house that had once felt warm. Now every corner felt dimmer, heavy with truth I hadn't yet spoken. I started in the kitchen clearing counters, wiping surfaces, small tasks to steady my breathing. When I reached the junk drawer near the refrigerator, it jammed halfway open. I tugged harder. Inside was a stack of envelopes, rubber banded together. Aiden always opened mail right away. Leighton did not. I slid one envelope free. It was a bank statement. Aiden's bank. My eyes skimmed the page. Unfamiliar withdrawals. Large ones. Regular ones. Aiden's voice echoed faintly from outside. Mom, do you know where we put the glass cleaner? I cleared my throat. Under the sink. He didn't hear the strain in my voice. I opened another envelope. Hotel charges from a place near the waterfront. The dates were burned into my mind. They matched days Aiden had called me, saying, Leighton's out with her co-workers tonight. I might stop by later. A receipt slipped from the back of the envelope. 2 dinners. 1 bottle of expensive wine. Drew's signature scrawled across the bottom. My fingers tightened around the paper. I turned to look around the kitchen, the home Aiden believed was built on trust. The walls suddenly felt closer, as if even the house knew what was happening beneath its own roof. I placed the envelopes back into the drawer, arranging them exactly as I found them. But I kept the single receipt, slipping it into the pocket of my sweater. Aiden walked in through the sliding door, wiping his hands on a towel. You okay? You look like you saw something weird in there. Just dust, I said softly. We moved to the hallway next, gathering shoes and sorting mail. He hummed under his breath while he worked an old habit from childhood. It twisted something inside me. In his bedroom. I offered to organize the nightstand. He agreed easily and went to check the dryer. The first drawer held nothing unusual. The second held a box of greeting cards, old photos, and something heavier, beneath another bundle of envelopes. These weren't bank statements. They were credit card bills. I unfolded the top one. Charges from boutiques Leighton never mentioned. Restaurant tabs in neighborhoods Aiden never visited. And more hotel charges. I pressed a hand to my chest as the truth layered itself in front of me. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't accidental. This was a pattern, a deliberate siphoning of money, time, loyalty, and trust. When Aiden returned, I had already closed the drawer. Laundry's done, he said lightly. Want some tea before you go? I smiled at him. A smile that took everything I had left. Tea sounds nice, I whispered. But inside, the pieces were no longer scattered. They were aligning into a truth so large it could no longer be ignored. Aiden stopped by my house after his shift, still in his uniform, smelling faintly of smoke and pine. He looked exhausted, but peaceful in the way only my son could be carrying everyone else's weight without ever noticing how heavy it had become. Mom, he said, dropping onto the sofa. I swear the whole station fell apart today. What a mess. I sat beside him, hands folded tightly in my lap. Aiden, we need to talk. He straightened slowly. That doesn't sound good. It isn't, I said softly. A beat of silence hung between us. I chose my words carefully. I've seen some things recently. Things that concern me. His brow furrowed. About what? About your home. Your marriage. My voice trembled on the last word. Aiden exhaled sharply. Mom, if this is about you not liking Leighton, it isn't about liking her, I said firmly. It's about what she's doing. He stared at me, guarded. What do you mean? I swallowed hard. I found receipts in your house, hotel charges, expensive dinners, withdrawals from your account you didn't make. His eyes widened, but not with understanding. with disbelief. Mom! He shook his head. Leighton wouldn't cheat on me. She wouldn't steal from me. I didn't say she stole. I said, voice low, but she's using your joint account. And she isn't alone. Aiden watched me carefully. Are you saying someone else is involved? I hesitated, then spoke the name that had been rotting between us. Drew. He flinched as if I had struck him. No, he said quickly. Mom, no. Drew is my closest friend. I know, I whispered. He has been there for me for years. He helped with the house, the wedding, everything. I know. I repeated, he would never betray me like that. My chest tightened. Aiden, I saw them. He froze. Saw what your wife and Drew behind the tent the night of the party. He stared at me as though the floor had vanished beneath him. No, he said again, voice shaking now. You're mistaken. You misunderstood. I didn't. He stood abruptly, pacing the living room. Mom, do you realize what you're saying, that my best friend and my wife, I know what I'm saying? That they're lying to me. Yes. That everything I built, everything I trusted was a joke. He turned toward me, eyes bright with anger and something more fragile, fear. You're wrong, he said. You have to be wrong. Drew would never do that. And Leighton, she loves me. I rose slowly, placing a hand on his arm. Sweetheart. He pulled away, not harshly, but like a man trying not to fall apart. I need proof, he muttered. Real proof. Not just what you think. Not just receipts or glimpses. My throat ached. I have messages. He looked up sharply. From Drew. I continued, talking about your savings, about how easy it is to manipulate your trust. He went silent. Then he whispered, Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I wanted to be certain. I said, because this would hurt you. Because once you hear it, you can never go back. He sank onto the sofa again, burying his face in his hands. I don't know what to believe, he said, voice cracking. I trust you, but I love them. I sat beside him, resting my hand between his trembling shoulders. You don't have to choose today, I said softly, but you do have to open your eyes. He didn't answer. He just sat there caught between two worlds, two loyalties, two versions of his own life, and I watched my son break in quiet pieces beside me. What would finally open his eyes completely? Aiden left my house with a promise to think, which meant he was going straight to Leighton. I didn't blame him. He needed answers from the people he loved, even if those answers would be wrapped in poison. By evening, my phone buzzed. Once, twice, 3 times. I let it ring. I already knew who it was. Finally, I answered. Leighton's voice burst through the line, tight and rehearsed. Marielle, we need to talk. I imagine you do, I replied. I just spoke to Aiden. She continued, her breath sharp. He's upset. He's confused. And it's because of you. Because of what he learned. I corrected. No, she said quickly. Because of what you told him. You've always struggled with boundaries. I pressed a hand against the countertop to steady myself. I told him the truth. She let out a brittle laugh. You told him your version of events. You know you get things mixed up sometimes. There it was. The first swing aimed not at facts, but at my age. My memory is perfectly clear, I said. Well, she replied coolly, your interpretations might not be. You've been under a lot of stress lately, and you took some things out of context. I closed my eyes for a moment. Leighton, I saw you, and I saw Drew. Silence. Then a soft, venom-laced whisper. You need to stop. Stop what? Trying to control him, she snapped. He's not a boy anymore. He doesn't need his mother interfering in our marriage. I straightened my spine. Protecting my son is not interfering. You're making him doubt us, she said. a tremor breaking through her anger. You're pushing him away. And at your age, that kind of loneliness. She trailed off, letting her implication hang. I am not afraid of loneliness, I answered evenly. I am afraid for him. The line crackled, footsteps shuffled. A new voice came on. Drew. Marielle, he said, too warmly. We're trying to work things out as a family. You're making this harder. Family. I repeated. Yes? He chuckled lightly. Look, I know you misread that moment behind the tent. It wasn't what you think. You kissed her. It was a joke. He insisted, a stupid one. And you've always been emotional. Another strike again tied to age. Fragility. Imagined confusion. You two are very coordinated tonight, I said. Did you rehearse? His voice hardened. You're hurting Aiden. No, I replied. You are. Leighton snatched the phone back. If you keep this up, he won't trust you anymore. He will, I said softly. Because truth lasts longer than manipulation. Her breath hitched. You're destroying our family. I almost laughed because the woman who betrayed my son now dared to speak of family. I'm not destroying anything. I said, I'm uncovering what already fell apart. Then stay out of it. She whispered fiercely. Stay out of our marriage. Stay away from our decisions. And stop poisoning Aiden against us. Before I could respond, the call ended. The phone screen went dark. I placed it gently on the table, breathing in through my nose, out through my mouth, steady and slow. Their accusations stung not because they were true, but because they revealed how far they were willing to go. They were running from the truth, dragging my son with them, but lies move fast only for a while, and I could already feel reality catching up. I barely slept after Leighton's call. Her accusations replayed in my mind, but beneath them was something colder fear for Aiden. If she and Drew were already twisting the truth, what else were they twisting? By morning, I knew I needed help. I drove to the office of a lawyer I'd met years ago at a community seminar. Rebecca Caldwell, late 50s. Sharp-eyed, steady-voiced, welcomed me with quiet concern. Marielle, sit. Tell me what's happening. I think my son is being financially targeted, I said, by his wife, and by someone he trusts. Rebecca leaned in. Start from the beginning. I told her everything, the kiss behind the tent, the messages on Leighton's phone, the missing money, the hotel receipts, the pressure to move funds. Her expression hardened. Marielle, this isn't simply infidelity. This is financial grooming. My stomach knotted. He doesn't see it. They've made him believe I'm confused. You are not confused, she said firmly. Manipulation thrives where love exists. She asked for the copies I'd taken. I handed her my phone, and she disappeared into the hallway, through the glass. I watched her speak with an associate, both of them serious. When she returned, she held a printed folder. It's worse than you thought. My breath caught. About 1 week ago, she said, someone attempted to open a joint investment portfolio using your son's information. The signature was forged. I gripped the chair. Aiden didn't do that. There was also an inquiry for a joint line of credit. It failed. But the secondary contact number belongs to Drew. A cold, steady resolve settled inside me. They're working together, Rebecca said. If they gain access to his accounts, they could drain them in days. Images of my son trusting, hardworking, blind to betrayal flashed through my mind. What do? I whispered. First, we secure his accounts. Fraud alerts. Credit locks. No joint accounts without in-person authorization. She paused. And if he doesn't believe you, we gather enough evidence that he must. I nodded. I need to protect him, even if he resents me. Rebecca squeezed my hand. People who steal from someone they love rarely stop at money. Her words stayed with me long after I left her office. The invitation sat on my kitchen table for 3 days before I touched it. A Portland community fundraiser one Aiden had volunteered at for years. One Leighton claimed to adore. One Drew always attended because he liked being seen. This year, the 3 of them would be there together, and so would I. When I finally picked up the envelope, my fingers felt heavier than they should. I opened it slowly, as if the paper itself might reveal something I had missed. But the same embossed lettering stared back an evening of charity, speeches, performances, and donors. A room full of people who believed in civic duty and integrity. The irony made my chest tight. Aiden stopped by that morning, tired and quiet. His eyes avoided mine in the way they had since our last conversation. "Mom," he said, rubbing the back of his neck, "Leighton and I will be at the fundraiser. Drew, too. I think it would be easier if you didn't come this year." I met his gaze. "Easier for who?" He looked away. "I just don't want drama." "I am not the one causing drama," I replied softly. His jaw twitched. He knew I was right, but he was clinging to the version of his life that hadn't yet fallen apart. "I need more time," he whispered. "You'll have it," I said. "But I won't stay silent forever." He nodded once, as if that was all he could handle, and left. When the door closed behind him, I walked to my desk and opened the drawer containing everything Rebecca helped me gather: forged signatures, screenshots of texts, fraudulent applications, hotel receipts, and statements showing withdrawals Aiden never made. Evidence didn't shake. Evidence didn't lie. Evidence carried a voice of its own. I placed each document into a clean folder. No labels. No dramatic markings. Just truth arranged neatly. As I worked, I remembered Rebecca's voice. Evidence is not confrontation. It's clarity. But clarity could be brutal, especially when delivered to people who had built their lives on illusion. That afternoon, Rebecca called. "Marielle," she said, "I know you're preparing for the fundraiser. Be cautious." "I'm not planning a scene," I replied, though the certainty in my voice surprised even me. "I just want the truth ready." "Good," she said, "because the moment they sense you're watching, they may act rashly. They already have." I murmured, "I'm just making sure my son sees it." Before she hung up, she added, "When you go tonight, walk in with your head high. You have nothing to hide." I thanked her and ended the call. The evening crept closer. I dressed slowly, choosing a navy blouse Aiden once said made me look strong. When I slipped the folder into my purse, a steady calm replaced the trembling that had followed me for days. This wasn't vengeance. This wasn't spectacle. This was the moment truth would stand beside me, finally unmasked. As I left the house, locking the door behind me, the sky over Portland dimmed into shades of gold and gray, the kind of sky that arrived before storms or revelations. And I knew, with a clarity that no longer frightened me, tonight might be the moment to end the lies once and for all. The ballroom buzzed with soft conversation when I arrived. Crystal glasses clinked, donors laughed politely, and a string quartet played something elegant enough to disguise tension if you weren't looking for it. I was. Across the room, Leighton stood beside Drew, her hand brushing his arm just a little too comfortably. Aiden was a step behind them, smiling at guests, unaware that the ground beneath him was about to split open. I walked with slow, steady steps, 68 years of storms guiding every breath. I nodded to familiar faces, accepted a few compliments, then slipped into the crowd unnoticed, until Aiden saw me. "Mom," he said, confused. I thought, "I know," I replied gently, "but I needed to be here." Leighton's smile tightened. "Marielle," she said through her teeth, This really isn't— Not now, Drew muttered, glancing around nervously. I didn't respond. Truth doesn't argue. It arrives. The host tapped the microphone, calling everyone to attention. We invite longtime community member Marielle Holt to say a few words about resilience and service. The room applauded. They had no idea what was coming. I stepped onto the stage. My hands did not shake. My voice carried easily. Thank you. I began. Tonight is about community, about trust, about what we give to one another freely and with integrity. People smiled at the expected pleasantry. Those who knew me well sensed the steel beneath it. I continued, but trust can be dangerous when placed in the wrong hands. Some betrayals arrive quietly, like a shadow that slips under your door while you're asleep. A ripple of confusion moved through the crowd. I looked directly at Aiden, his brow creased. Something inside him braced. When betrayal comes from those we love, I said softly, the wound cuts deeper than any stranger could manage. My gaze shifted to Leighton. Her face paled. And sometimes, I added, betrayal is not just emotional. It is financial, calculated, planned. Drew stepped forward as if to interrupt, but someone from the event staff gently held him back. I reached into my purse and placed a folder on the podium. These are copies of attempted joint investment applications filed without my son's consent, unauthorized credit line inquiries, and bank statements showing withdrawals he did not make. Gasps filled the room. Leighton whispered sharply to Drew, "Do something." I lifted my hand. "I'm not finished." The room stilled. I continued. There are also hotel receipts, restaurant charges, messages between two people who believed they could hide their affair behind excuses and lies. Aiden staggered a step. His voice cracked. "Mom, what are you—" I opened the folder and held up a printed message. "Read it," I said gently. He took the paper with trembling fingers. His eyes moved across the words, the lines where Drew mocked his trust, where Leighton promised she could access his savings. Leighton rushed forward. "Aiden, she's twisting everything. She's confused." Do not," I said quietly. "Use my age to cover your deceit." A hush spread over the ballroom. I reached for a small recorder in my bag. This is the moment their truth became indisputable. I pressed play. Drew's recorded voice filled the hall, low, intimate, unmistakable. "He'll give you anything you ask for. He doesn't even think you're capable of lying. That's why this will work." A woman's voice followed Leighton. "Once the money moves, we're done here. He'll never see it coming." The room erupted in a mix of gasps, murmurs, and disbelief. Aiden looked shattered. His hands shook as he dropped the papers, his face collapsing under the weight of truth he had fought not to see. He turned slowly toward them. "You," his voice broke. "You used me." Leighton reached for him. "Aiden, please." He stepped back. "Don't touch me." Drew tried to speak, but no sound came out. The ballroom was silent except for the quiet hum of the overhead lights. I stepped down from the stage, not triumphant, not vindicated, simply present. Aiden met my eyes, his full of devastation and something else. "Understanding," he whispered. "Mom, I'm so sorry." I cupped his cheek, steadying him the way I had when he was a boy. "It's over now," I said. "You see clearly." But the truth had only begun to settle. After the fundraiser's chaos, the board called security to escort Drew and Leighton out. But Aiden insisted on facing them himself, outside, away from the eyes that had already seen too much. I followed slowly, far enough to give him space, close enough to catch him if he fell. They stood in the parking lot under a flickering streetlight. Leighton clung to her purse. Drew hovered beside her, pale and shaking. Aiden's voice was hollow. "How long?" Leighton swallowed. "Aiden, please, how long?" he repeated, louder this time. Drew stepped forward. It wasn't what your mother made it look like. Do not speak for her. Aiden snapped. Not anymore. Leighton exhaled a fractured breath. A few months. Aiden stared at her, disbelief shifting into something darker. And the money? She looked down. We were only trying to borrow. A broken laugh slipped from him. Borrow? You applied for joint investments behind my back. You tried to open credit lines using my information. Drew stepped in again. We had a plan. You would have understood if Aiden turned on him with a fury I'd never seen. You were my friend, my brother. I trusted you with everything. Drew's voice cracked. I made mistakes. You made choices. Aiden corrected. Every lie you told her, every kiss, every dollar you tried to take from me, that was a choice. Leighton whispered. Aiden, I loved you. He stared at her for a long moment. No, he said quietly. You loved what I could give you. She trembled. I didn't mean for it to go this far, but it did. He said, because you let it. Because. Police lights turned the corner, then two officers arriving at the fundraiser's request. They asked questions calmly, professionally. Rebecca had already alerted them earlier about the fraudulent financial activity. Leighton tried to keep her voice steady as she answered questions. But her hands shook. Drew stood stiffly, offering short replies, his composure unraveling by the second. This isn't necessary, Drew muttered. We can handle this privately. No, Aiden said. You forfeited private the moment you both tried to destroy my life. The officers took statements, photographed copies of the financial documents, and issued instructions for the next steps. No handcuffs, not yet, but consequences were set in motion. When they walked away, Drew tried one last time. Aiden, listen. Aiden's voice was final. We're done. Forever. Drew looked at me, desperation in his eyes. Marielle, please tell him I have nothing left to tell him, I said. You did that yourself. He flinched at the softness of my tone. Leighton turned to Aiden, tears streaking down her cheeks. Where will you go anywhere but home? He whispered. He walked toward me then, shoulders trembling. When he reached me, he didn't speak, he just leaned into my arms, letting himself break for the first time since he was a child. I held him, steady and quiet, while the night settled around us. Later, he packed a few bags from the house he once thought held his future. He didn't look at the photographs, didn't touch the wedding gifts, didn't pause in the doorway. He simply left, back at my house. He sank onto the sofa. I don't know how to start over, he said, voice raw. I know, I whispered, brushing his hair back like I used to when he was little. But you will. He closed his eyes, breathing deeply, painfully. What remained after the collapse was a man stripped of illusions, but finally, painfully, free. Aiden stayed with me for the first week. He moved through the house like a man learning how to breathe again, slow, uneven, startled by silence. I cooked for him, though sometimes he barely ate. I made tea, though he let it grow cold. I sat beside him without asking questions, letting him speak only when he could. One afternoon, he finally did. I feel stupid, he whispered. I shook my head. You trusted. That is not stupidity. He rubbed his face. I should have seen it. No, I said gently. They hid it because they knew you wouldn't. He looked up, eyes tired. How do you forgive yourself for missing every sign I touched his hand? You don't forgive yourself for missing signs. You forgive yourself for being human. He didn't answer, but his shoulders lowered slightly, as if my words had taken a sliver of weight from him. When he returned to work, he did so cautiously. His captain gave him lighter shifts. His co-workers pretended not to know what happened, but pity softened their voices. Aiden hated that most of all. I just want to feel normal again, he said one night. You will, I replied. Normal comes back slowly, like spring. He exhaled. Mom, thank you. You don't need to thank me. I said, you're my son. After he fell asleep, I sat alone in the living room. The quiet pressed against me. But unlike the silence in his house tainted, heavy, this one felt clean. I thought of my age, of how loss feels different when you're 68. It doesn't crush you the way it did at 25. It sinks. It settles into your bones, into the soft parts of your memory, reminding you that life is shorter now. More fragile, more precious. But resilience lives there too. So I began rebuilding in my own quiet way. I signed up for an art class at the community center. I hadn't painted since my early 30s. My hands were slower now, but the colors came easily rust oranges, soft blues, greens that reminded me of summers before my husband died. My instructor, a woman in her 70s named Joyce, said, "There's steadiness in you. You paint like someone who's survived things." I smiled. I suppose I have. Old friends invited me to small gatherings, tea on porches, book clubs where we barely discussed the book, long walks by the river. I found myself laughing again, quietly at first, then fully. One morning, Aiden joined me for a walk. The wind was brisk, carrying the smell of wet leaves. He slipped his arm through mine like he used to when he was a boy. "Mom," he said, "I'm getting better. I can see that. I still feel broken sometimes." "That's all right," I said. "Broken things can be rebuilt. Sometimes stronger." He nodded. The sunlight caught the side of his face, older, wiser, humbled, but alive, fully alive. As we walked, I realized healing doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with fireworks or grand epiphanies. It appears in small breaths, in quiet mornings, in conversations that don't hurt anymore. It grows in the gentle work of living. Is peace truly possible after so much pain? 6 months later, the air in Portland felt different, lighter somehow, like the city itself had shaken off something heavy. Aiden walked toward me from the parking lot near the Willamette River, keys swinging in his hand, face steadier than I had seen in years. "Sorry I'm late," he said, settling beside me on the bench. "Traffic was awful." "You're right on time," I replied. Studying him quietly, he looked stronger. There was color in his face again. His shoulders no longer slumped under invisible weight. He had moved into a modest apartment near the fire station, signed up for therapy, and started volunteering on his days off. Most importantly, he smiled now without forcing it. "How's the new place?" I asked. He sighed, but the sound was peaceful. "It's good, strange sometimes, quiet, but good. And you?" He nodded slowly. "I'm starting to like myself again." I leaned back, letting the breeze brush across my face. "That's all I ever wanted." He looked at me carefully. "Mom, thank you for everything, for seeing what I couldn't. I didn't want to see it either," I admitted softly. "But once truth knocks, you answer." He chuckled faintly. "I wish truth would knock a little gentler." "Truth rarely has manners," I said, "but it does have purpose." He fell silent for a moment, then added, "Rebecca helped me file everything officially. Drew's out of state now, and Leighton, well, she reached a settlement. I'm not angry anymore. Just done." "Good," I whispered. "Done is a kind of peace." He rested his head briefly on my shoulder like he used to when he was small. I closed my eyes, feeling the quiet victory in that simple touch. After he left for his shift, I stayed by the water, watching the river catch the last streaks of orange light. The Willamette moved steadily, carrying everything forward: debris, memories, broken things, beautiful things. Time had done the same for us. For a long while, I sat with my own thoughts. My 68-year-old body ached more these days. My hands slower, my breath shorter on walks, but inside, I felt young. Not in the way of years, but in the way of beginnings. The best part wasn't the night I exposed the lies. It wasn't the moment faces turned pale or secrets cracked open. The best part was after watching my son rise from the wreckage with clarity, strength, and dignity, watching myself shed fear and rediscover my own independence, realizing that endings, even painful ones, can be gifts wrapped in brokenness. Sometimes betrayal doesn't ruin us. It redirects us. It pushes us toward versions of ourselves who are stronger, wiser, and more compassionate than before. Healing is not a straight line. It is a mosaic of tiny steps, hard truths, and quiet mornings where we choose hope over bitterness. And choosing hope every single time is where rebirth begins. As the sun slipped behind the bridges, I stood and exhaled deeply, the kind of exhale that feels like letting go. The river kept moving, and so would we. If this story touched you, like the video, subscribe for more, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. If betrayal can remake us, what might hope create next?